Hey y'all, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about collecting your own spores at home so that you never have to buy genetics again. This process is super simple and I'm going to explain all my tips and tricks to make this process extra simple for beginners. Almost every mushroom that grows in the wild produces spores. Spores are like the seeds of mushrooms, and as a mushroom reaches the end of its life cycle, the mushroom will grow and open its gills and drop these spores. In nature, these spores would normally just be carried in the wind and continue the genetic species throughout the forest. In home growing or home cultivation, we collect the spores manually in a very contained environment to ensure less contamination and to carry on our strong genetics into the future. Here is what you're going to need to get started. You are going to need aluminum foil, a bag with a lid, any old piece of Tupperware will do, a pair of scissors, a mask, some gloves, and here now I'm going to magically change my outfit so that my armpits are covered and hair is pulled back. The golden rule of mushroom cultivation is that you can't use too much rubbing alcohol, so you'll notice here that I'm sanitizing my hands multiple times, putting my gloves back on, and sanitizing them again, then putting my mask on and spraying my hands again. We want to begin by cleaning ourselves first. So we changed our outfit, we sanitized our hands, put our mask on, and then here you can see I'm spraying down the table and using a paper towel to wipe that down and then spraying it again. So thoroughly sanitize yourself and your area before beginning the spore collection process. Now let's get ready to harvest some mushrooms. I'll bring over my monotub, sanitize the air, sanitize my scissors, spray my hands again, and get ready to harvest whatever mushroom I want to collect spores from. You can skip this step if you've found mushrooms in a forest that you want to carry on the genetics of, but just make sure that you know exactly what kind of mushroom you picked from the forest, as of course some mushrooms can be harmful. I'll go over some more tips at the end of this video to help you decide which mushroom is best for spore collection, but the most important thing is that the underside of the cap of the mushroom, also known as the gills, are exposed. These mushrooms might have been a bit past their prime, but they'll do just fine. Now I'll set these mushrooms on a clean surface and go ahead and cut out some aluminum foil. In an ideal world, I would actually suggest doing this step of cutting and preparing the aluminum foil before you harvest your mushrooms so that it's ready to go, but I have a clean space here, so I'm not too worried about it. Now I will prepare my container by first dropping the lid. Just kidding, you don't have to do that part. I will give it a big spray with rubbing alcohol though, which is essential. Clean my scissors, clean my aluminum foil again, and chop down a nice little square of aluminum foil that fits perfectly inside of my container. And again, you could perform this part of the procedure before you harvest the mushrooms so everything is sterile and ready to go right away. But the goal here in the end is just to have a clean space for your mushroom head to rest in. So now I will separate the cap of the mushroom from the stem, and then you can see these beautiful gills underneath the cap are where all the spores are stored. And we are going to lay that cap of the mushroom gill side down on top of the foil and let it rest for 12 to 24 hours. I'll leave a little gap in the lid to allow for air transfer and avoid collection of moisture on the print. With that, our work for today is complete. Here's what you do the next day. Yay, this is so exciting. Our little mushroom is getting ready to drop some spores onto the foil. Tomorrow morning, I'll come over and I'll take the mushroom off of the top of the foil. I'll just lift it up. Make sure you do this part in a clean environment. Once you take the mushroom off of the foil, it's going to look something like this. It'll basically just be like a little black spot on the foil, and I'll show some pictures here of what your spore print will look like. Tomorrow, when I'm in a clean, sterile environment, just like I was today, I will take the cap off of this little container, lift the mushroom cap off, put it in the dehydrator. It's still totally fine to use. And then I will use my clean hands with my mask on and a clean shirt to take my spore print and just fold it up. I'll fold it up. I'll put the little edges over it so it's nice and sealed. just like this. And then I will put this sealed, beautiful spore print into a Ziploc bag, and I will label it with what it's called and the date so that it's ready and stored for future use. And it'll last a really, really, really long time in the fridge. Like, don't even worry about how long you're storing it in there. Spores are like seeds and they last for a really long time. So as long as we are keeping it in a sealed, clean environment, this spore print can feed our future cultivation processes for years to come. I'm going to share a couple extra tips now for beginners to help your spore collection process be as smooth and easy as possible. But before I do, I want to let you guys know that if you want some extra support along your spore collection process, we are selling pre-sanitized sheets of aluminum foil that are also pre-cut to the perfect dimensions and already cleaned so that you can have kind of a little kit to collect spores at home. And along with this kit of pre-cut and sanitized sheets of aluminum foil will come a couple sheets of paper with pre-written, very clear and detailed instructions that are written out for you to follow along as you collect your own spores. So for those of you who need a little extra support and just want to make sure that your foil is super clean and that you have these instructions to kind of look at throughout the process, check out the link, the very top link in the description below to check out our kits and have some support in your spore collection process. So now for some beginner tips. As a beginner, when I first started harvesting my own spores, there were a few things that I wasn't really clear on that if I had known in the beginning would have made my spore collection process a lot smoother and easier. And these tips kind of revolve around this acronym that I came up with called FOB, F-O-B. So the F in FOB stands for first flush. I highly recommend collecting spores from your first flush of mushrooms. And in case you don't know what a flush is, basically when you are growing mushrooms, you'll notice that they grow in waves. So you'll have one wave, one flush of mushrooms come up from the soil, so beautiful. Typically the first flush of mushrooms that come up are a little bit smaller, but a ton of them, like a lot of really beautiful mushrooms will come up during that first flush. You'll harvest those, and then another flush, another wave of mushrooms will come up from the soil, and that's called your second flush. And then after you harvest those, if you're lucky and you're keeping a really sterile and clean environment, you'll see a third, fourth, maybe even a fifth flush of mushrooms come to the surface. When we are collecting spores, we want to choose to collect spores from mushrooms that have grown during the first wave or the first flush of mushrooms. And that's because these mushrooms are going to be the cleanest. These mushrooms have the least chance of being contaminated by other mold spores or bacteria that may develop over time during those second or third flushes. During the second and third flushes, you're more likely to see signs of mold and contamination, at which point you would not want to collect spores from mushrooms in those tubs, because there's a chance that they would be contaminated and ruined by mold spores. So another reason why we want to choose mushrooms from the first flush is because if you think about it, these mushrooms that are coming up in the first flush are like so excited to be alive. These mushrooms are really strong and like the first horses like coming out of the gate. Like these are really strong, healthy, young, vibrant mushrooms, and those are the kind of genetics that we want to be carrying on into the future. So the first flush, F, first flush, is the ideal time to be collecting spores. My second tip, and the second letter in the acronym O, means or stands for open caps. So I'll show some pictures here. You can see there are some mushrooms here in these pictures where their caps are still closed. So the caps haven't opened yet. And then you can see in these pictures here how these mushrooms have opened caps. Their caps have opened up and the spores underneath are exposed and are getting ready to drop. And even more ideally, not only do we want our caps to be open, like I showed you in those pictures, but we also want the veil to have just broken. So in case you don't know what the veil is in an anatomy of a mushroom, I'll show you some pictures here. Basically, a veil is like a little thin sheet that will protect the gills of the mushroom, but eventually that veil will fall. So ideally, we want to collect spores from a mushroom where the veil has just split from the cap, because that veil will have acted like a contam protective sheet over the spores. So as soon as it breaks, the spores are ready to be released, but they haven't been exposed to the air for too long, so they have a much less likely chance of being contaminated, which is super ideal. So first flush for F, O stands for open caps, and then the B in FOB stands for beautiful. And this is actually my number one tip for beginners who are collecting spores for the first time. Keep in mind that these spores that you're collecting are the genetics, are the foundation for your future flushes of mushrooms. So whatever mushroom you choose to harvest spores from, you want it to be a really beautiful mushroom, like a mushroom that's super healthy, strong, vibrant, a mushroom that you would love to see like copy pasted into your future grows 100 times over. Choosing a beautiful mushroom for your spore collection will ensure that your future mushrooms, which are essentially going to be the babies of this mother mushroom, are similar in their health, in their size, in their behavior as it grows. So yeah, choosing a beautiful mushroom is so key to ensuring the future health of your mushroom growing process. In my next video, we will be taking this spore print and putting it onto several dishes of agar. And from there, we'll turn it into liquid culture, and liquid culture we'll put into grain jars we'll put into tubs, and eventually we'll grow some more mushrooms that look just like the ones that we collected spores from today. So if you want to come along this journey with me, make sure to subscribe to follow along. And I'd also like to remind you that you did not see any ads during this video. We choose not to monetize our videos and to instead support those who are just trying to learn. And we get support in other ways, like through our website, oneearthmushrooms.com, where we sell growing supplies to support your cultivation journey. We also have a Patreon, so you can check that out. The link is in my description box down below. And then we also have a Venmo if you would like to just send a donation. We totally welcome that, and it supports the ongoing cultivation of this channel. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Much love!